Hello, everyone, and welcome to this brand new spoiler review for Succession. We're doing season 4, episode 9 here, Church and State. So much to get into. I am the Outlaw John Rocha, joined as always by the Lord himself, Lord Shannon McClung. Shannon, how are you? How are you feeling, my man?
Johnny, my goodness, this is the type when you are regal like myself, when you are a noble. After watching an episode like this, you really want to grow eyes in the back of your head because you never know what family member is going to sneak up behind you and cut your throat.
That's true. Also, to wipe your tears, wipe hers. Let's go wipe your tears if you're royalty, of course, for sure. But yeah, this is quite an episode we're diving into. I think it's the longest episode of the season, maybe the longest episode of the series. It feels like, if I'm correct, I don't know. Maybe you guys can correct me down in the comment section, but it feels like it was a pretty long episode. So much happened here in this episode. I'm going to break it down, spoiler review it. So if you haven't seen it, this is the place to stop, go and watch it, and then come and hang out with us. And of course, before we do, so remind you all to please subscribe to the channel down below. You know, we crossed 28,000 subscribers just a couple of days ago. Let's keep marching to 50,000 subscribers. Get me under the Waystar Gojo deal. Get me to 50,000 subscribers, for God's sakes, by the end of the year. Would appreciate you all madly doing that. And so just to let you know, we are going to spoil it. We're going to break this thing down into 5 sections, talking about what happened throughout the episode. We're going to keep the recaps brief in next section so we can get into the discussion. And one last thing, full disclosure, both Shannon and I have had to be at funerals where we had our fathers buried. So if some emotion comes up, if some tough moments come up, just letting you know ahead of time, to prepare ahead of time for Shannon and I getting a little Roman, getting a little verklempt in the situation as we talk about it. But Shannon, big episode. Let's get your overall thoughts on this one. A lot of maneuvering, Kendall and Roman doing their thing, power switching. It was Roman coming in with hubris. It is Kendall coming out of this episode, clearly the number one guy heading into the series finale. Shiv and Matsson working their magic there, ending up getting the ear of Mencken, who shows up at this funeral. We also see Lady Caroline bringing all the ladies of Logan's life into the front row. We see Greg weaseling his way to being a pallbearer there and getting an intro to the future possible President Mencken. And there's protests outside, which Tom calls a little Tiananmen. And we end up with this now very clear at the end of the episode, a battle that is set to go forward next week, and the board is all involved. So thoughts on all of this and the eulogies, but thoughts overall on this episode before we break it down piece by piece.
I mean, again, this is another episode where watching it with the subtitles on the second viewing is really helpful because 100%. You definitely get, watching it the first time, there's just so much going on. I mean, it is such a grand show, and listening to Mark Mylod in the post credits and the controlling the narrative behind the scenes feature, you see like what an undertaking it is to shoot the show, especially in a scene like this, that you're in this massive location, so many background performers, you only have a limited time, so they're shooting multiple cameras at once. So a lot of the you're just so taken in by the scale of it. Yeah. And obviously we're getting the humor. Like, this is definitely one of the funnier episodes. I mean, and it's sort of that funeral gallows humor. You're just knee deep in this sadness and in this tragedy, and that's where you have some of the funnier moments. But so much of it hits a little closer when you understand 100% what this look means, what that line means. But it was so good. I mean, the whole ladies of Logan sitting in the front row, where the kids, the Sib's mom sees Carrie, brings her over, introduces her to her Carrie, and then brings in Marcia in the fold. And the look between Marcia and Lady Collingwood, and then Marcia takes Carrie's hand. It's like, are you doing this to Lady Collingwood, or is this genuine? I mean, it's so difficult to tell. But it was just so much fun seeing all of our characters together. Karl and Frank, really do not want to say a bad word about Logan. I mean, Frank gets the closest in that, like, look, he was a salty dog, but he was a good egg. It's like, and then you have Ewan's eulogy, which was just him getting up to the dais as Greg is dropping the ball again. But the whole interaction between Greg and his mom, a character we've not seen in a long, long time.
Yeah.
Super funny exchange. And look, I got to tell you right now, I mean, my prediction, because we've talked about who's going to come out on top.
Yeah.
I don't think any of the Roy children are coming out on top. I think they are going to be shown the door. And granted, they're going to be shown the door with millions, possibly billions, but they will. My guess is that the three of them will not be involved in the company going forward.
Wow, that's a strong prediction. You're already jumping ahead to the final part of this review. But
sorry.
Now you've previewed it. We'll hear more of your reasoning as we get to that section. Yeah, I absolutely love this episode. Shannon, I don't recall a season where every episode was a banger. Maybe Andor is about the closest thing that I can recall where, in my opinion, where every episode was an absolute banger. There was no filler episode. Every storyline was so interestingly explored, and by the end, you're just absolutely exhausted, and you're saying to yourself, well, hell, was that the best episode of the season or the series, or was the one last week? So this speaks to the incredible craftsmanship of Jessie Armstrong overall, and of course, Mark Mylod as well in this particular episode, but the other directors who've been involved in the other episodes as well, the incredible Lawrence Scafaria, all these other directors. I mean, the incredible weight that they bring to these scenes, to these storylines, the writing, all of it, the acting going on with all of these actors as well. I mean, you could make an entire new episode with no lines of just reaction shots from everybody if you wanted to take a challenge and edit that out of this episode, because there's so much life going on in these reactions, so much extra levels and complexities going on. These looks that I think are fantastic, especially Mencken, who is Justin Kirk is just doing a wonderful job as Mencken, and Justin, it was so great in Perry Mason season 2 as well. So it's nice to see that HBO keeps certain actors under their umbrella. Hope Davis as well being in Perry Mason season 2, and so it's great to see, and her doing like a cameo, show up with her dad, who the joy of getting to bury him and be at his funeral and outlive him. I wish we'd had more with him. And where's Stewie in all of this, for God's sake? So I want to see Stewie's reaction to all. So just so much going on here amidst the political maneuvering, amidst the idea of the deal and all of this back and forth and power switching and power dynamics changing. It's an incredible thing to witness. And, you can't even, you and I have grieved for a small amount of people in comparison to the Roys in a church to actually have to put your grief on display and then your eulogy being judged as whether you can handle running the company or not. There's all this extra pressure that goes on to it, and we see what happens in the eulogies and who stands up and who doesn't, and what this all will lead to. But let's jump into it specifically. Let's go through it one by one here, section by section. Let's jump into first. Everything before the funeral here. Shiv is lining up Matsson to drop the numbers while the election controversy is fresh, providing him a shield. Roman is practicing his speech, and he's on a high after his escapades at the election the night before. He rejects Kendall's calls to take some of the negative dialogue and negative press about their dad and about the election, to take it easy on it. He's like, no, I don't want to get into the Discord. Kendall deals later with Rava trying to take their kids out of the city, not wanting to come to the funeral, and then deals with Jess wanting to move on because of Mencken, even though she says, let's talk about it later. I don't want to talk about it now. He makes her talk about it, then gets mad that she brought it up and picked the timing. So a total dick move, aka Logan move by Kendall there. Also, Hugo tells Kendall that Matsson has released those numbers that I was referring to just a couple seconds ago as they walk into the church, so giving him a little bit of leverage here. And what's weird heading to the church also is all three of them ride in the car, even after Shiv's betrayal. All three of them are still in the car, still having their banter, and Shiv just casually drops that she's pregnant to all of them. And, and Roman makes a lot of offensive comments about it that are just insane. And then we see that Tom can't come, and Greg is going insane, trying to get permission, finally gets it, and he heads there on one of those city bikes rolling down the street there. So all of this happening just before we go into the church. So Shannon, what do you think about how they're laying this groundwork here with Shiv and Matsson in the numbers, Kendall with Roman here having these conversations, Roman feeling himself, Kendall and Rava, I mean, him threatening to lay down in front of the car. I've heard that from a certain actor before and a certain actress getting into it. I don't want to mention the names. And then all this idea of her being pregnant and then Greg finagling his way to go to the funeral.
I mean, the whole thing with Shiv, like we do see that Shiv is really smart. Like, hey, look, I'm not happy about how last night turned out, but there's a lot of noise out there now. Right now is the time to release this stuff, and hopefully nobody's going to notice. So again, we do see that Shiv, even though she is dealing with the death of her father, she is dealing with just informing Tom that she's pregnant and did not get the reaction that she was hoping for and or expected. She is still kind of keeping a cool head. It's like, all right, you know, she is still thinking tactically, because when you think of like in the past and like, you know, real life, when a big news event happens, because the news cycle is so fast now, a lot of them have a 72-hour lifespan.
Yeah. Yep.
And something else is going to happen. And that story, the first story is going to lose air. So she, you know, again, we see that she's really, really smart. As you said, Roman is just dancing on a cloud right now.
Yeah.
Can't be bothered with Kendall's calls. Can't be bothered with asking Mencken to sort of lower the temperature, despite the fact that it is their father's, they're burying their father that day. And then, I mean, I think the whole section with Kendall was just fantastic. I mean, again, Jeremy Strong, all three of them just had a truly banger of an episode.
Yeah.
But it really starts with Jeremy Strong, and we see that call from Rava and that imagery of businesses being boarded up because there's going to be a march, there's going to be a protest. There is the potential for civil unrest. The moment that he hears that Rava not only is not going to be attending his dad's funeral with their kids, she's taking them upstate because she is the thing that he promised didn't happen. And so now she's like, I have made the decision. I have to do what's right for our children. And Kendall talking to his driver, Fakret, I believe the name is, and saying like, get me there in 3 minutes. And again, knowing the type of performer that Jeremy Strong is, that he does have a unique kind of solitary process to get where he needs to get. This is the type of scene where you can see the results of that work. While it might be a little alienating to his castmates, and personally, I would not want to share the screen with him in a moment like this, because I would feel a little unsafe isn't the right word, but I would be like, I don't know what's going to happen here. And watching how he's dealing with Rava, saying that I'm going to a judge right now to get an order so you can't leave the city. And then he threatens to lay down in front of the car, which he doesn't do. Kendall seems to be so good at the shooting from the hip with the business part. But the moment where emotions get introduced into the equation, he falls apart. Like he absolutely crumbles. And you can really say that for all three of them. Like the moment that they have to display any sort of vulnerability, they just can't do it. The thing with Jess, especially, seeing that, like, he's like, what's this meeting with you? And and she's like, you know what, don't worry about that. And his whole like, what's going on? And so not only is he potentially losing his children, he's losing one of his confidants, someone that he trusts. And the way that he negs her, the whole like, you know what, this is fucking dumb. You're being dumb. Like if you're sorry about this, maybe you should reconsider. Like how she didn't, do a 180 at that point and just be like, you know what, I'm good. We're having the conversation now. I'll see you later. You helped elect the crypt keeper. Like there's no way that I can stay here. And then him blaming her, as you already said, the whole thing of like, well, no, I want to talk about it now. Then thanks for bringing that up. Like, just such a lack of awareness, which it is incredible.
Yeah, I love the way they lay the groundwork here for everything. I mean, the Roman stuff, he's almost like Sinatra singing to himself, Bebop a Lubin and all this kind of shit, looking at himself in the mirror. He thinks he's going to deliver this incredible speech. He's pre-grieved. He's fine, right? Shiv on the other side, because of what happened last night, and we remember her last scene in the episode last night. Remember, each episode is a day. She is saying, you know, she's already in the process of maneuvering things and getting into a position to really screw Kendall and Roman. So she's already lining things up with Matsson. And yeah, everybody who's ever worked for a news organization will tell you, you want to drop something that's really combustible and people forget about it, drop it at Friday at 6 p.m. That's when you drop it, because people are focused on the weekend. They're not focused on going out. They're not focused on, like, you know, learning about this stuff and what have you. Or you drop it on the weekend when people could care less about stuff and they want to just go and hang out and take a break from work. So those are the things. So she was smart to have Matsson drop the number. So it's, you know, and when Hugo tells him that she dropped that the numbers dropped, you know, Kendall gets that information, but there's not much blowback. There's nothing going on, which we find out from Shiv in that situation. But Kendall, yeah, I mean, this is the scene. I mean, both women are leaving him, right? He is becoming Logan Roy more than the other two kids. He is becoming Logan Roy, and it's almost veering on tragedy. If he wasn't such a prick, this would be tragic. That his desire for his father's acceptance has now turned him into the thing that he hated the most about his father. Like all the different characteristics that he's hated the most about his father. He sacrificed his child's feelings to put Mencken in power just so they could stay at Waystar and stop the deal happening with Matsson. Now Rava's taking the kids out of the city. He sees all this stuff going on, and instead of being understanding about it, he pulls a power move and goes and threatens her and thinks it's cool to do that in front of her children, in front of their children, knocks on the window. You know, these aggravated, aggressive actions here, instead of being understanding and protecting his children, which he claims he wants to do. He wants to bring them into the fire with him because he wants them to say goodbye to their grandfather, who they probably kind of hated. So it just, there's a lot here with Kendall that's going on. And then you have another woman leave him in Jess, essentially. So it's all, he's venting and shooting out and trying to destroy and set fire to everything around him, because he can't deal with the losses that are piling up. He even says it when he gets in the car, right? He says, oh, what a shit day, you know, let's add to the shit day, you know? And so already that's how he's processing the grief of his father, is just lashing out and trying to destroy everybody around him. So just real tough to watch in certain moments, especially Jess. Oh, and shout out to, I want to give love to the actress, to Natalie Gold, who plays Rava, and to Juliana Canfield, who plays Jess, because Juliana's been from the beginning. So, you know, we see when Juliana's come to this moment, and we know that ties into the scene in the last episode when her and Greg are by the elevator and they realize that they have voted Mencken into power, and she has worked for the company that put Mencken into power, that is probably going to take away all her rights as a woman, and as a black woman, especially her reaction to that. So it's really powerful. Of course, the insensitive white boss who doesn't want to understand what the ramifications of this stuff is. You know, you see that coming through as well. All right, let's move on to just before the eulogies. I want to separate the ceremony into two sections here, Shannon. Everything at the funeral. Roman is working the room, still on the high, still making his comments, really inappropriate comments about Marsha. You thought he was inappropriate in the car to his sister. He is super inappropriate about Marsha and wanted to sleep with her and all this stuff. It feels like he's king shit. So, you know, you felt those moments where you feel like you're the man in the room and shit. And then other people start to slowly, to cut you off at the knees, and you realize you're not as popular as you think. Him going up to Frank and Frank giving him the mm-hms, and as he's trying to say that Kendall's not going to be able to lead this thing, he might stumble at the finish line. You need to come with me. I'll be the only cherry on top of the cake. And Frank's like, yeah, sure, kid, sure, whatever. And then Greg finally gets to the wedding, to the funeral, tries to get a Mencken intro through Roman. Roman tells him, well, look, you watch Ewan, you watch him, your dad or your grandfather, and make sure he's not going to speak or whatever, and then I'll get you the intro, no problem. And even finagles his way to becoming a pallbearer, as I mentioned earlier. We see Caroline talking to the kids, which is super awkward. I mean, it's Shiv says, like, I thought I could hear the Dalmatians howling, which is hilarious. Such a great line. And then Peter creepily comes in, Lady Caroline's new husband, and he says, here's daddy. Oh, super awkward, man. Super fucking awkward. And I loved it. Then he gets pulled away to talk to a bunch of senators. Then Caroline, as you mentioned here earlier, Shannon, grabs Carrie to sit with her. And Carrie showed up with a lawyer in case she was going to be barred from getting in, and her friend. comes in, but then Caroline uses Carrie to jab Marcia by also introducing Sally Ann, who was her Carrie, and they all meet each other, and somehow they all end up in the front row together. And she puts her hand, Marcia does, on Carrie's hand, and Carrie starts crying. And these are all the loves of Logan's life. And on the other side, Shiv is pitching Matsson on taking on an American CEO to make it palatable to Mencken to accept the deal, not block the deal. And Matsson is considering it, and she nominates herself as the American CEO who could take over. And even Matsson talks about, well, not that much experience, but then brings up her pregnancy, which apparently he's heard about already. And 36, she says, oh yeah, I'll go, labor 36 hours. I'll be emailing, or maternity leave rather, 36 hours. And I'll be emailing during my cesarean. No big deal. Boom, boom, boom. So everybody moving their angles before these eulogies. What do you think about all this stuff here before the eulogies here, Shannon?
I mean, the moment of 6'7" Greg, Nicholas Braun on a city bike, as you mentioned already, because Tom had told him it's gridlock. You may as well walk. And we just see he's just all arms and legs. Just such a funny visual. We get more of the Hugo deference to Kendall, because he's the one who brings it to his attention about the numbers that have been released, the subscriber numbers. And, that kind of piggybacking on Kendall overhearing that Hugo's daughter had potentially sold some stock illegally,
right?
Like using that insider info. Right. And you see that Hugo is going to be Kendall's guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, just how funny this scene was with all of the entrances at the funeral. This is where that comedy comes out of tragedy. Mm-hmm. At my father's funeral, I was certainly very, very numb. I was definitely in that not quite that Roman place. I had no cause to celebrate, but there was definitely that sort of it feels like you're on the outside of like an aquarium. It feels like you're watching everything, like you're not really a part of it.
Yeah. So
getting to see, I mean, the moment that Shiv does say the whole, like, I thought I heard Dalmatians howling, like that wonderful, wonderful line of dialogue, that Peter coming up saying daddy's here. Oh my gosh. So weird and gross. Oscar wearing a freaking black turtle.
Oh yes, right.
To a funeral. This Swedish Grim Reaper that guy is. But also love the conversation between Matsson and Shiv, where she, again, you see her, she knows she's on her back foot right now. Mm-hmm. So the whole, like, how can we work this? And she's got this great idea that, if we give him an American CEO, that might make the pill, that might make the medicine go down easier. Yeah. And when she proposes herself, and he's like, not a whole lot of experience, though, right? And then she comes back with political acumen. I know ATN, X, Y, and Z. And then the news that Shiv is pregnant. I can't remember if Caroline notices first or if it's Shiv or if it's Matsson. I think it's Caroline. Like, she literally notices. She hugs her and just kind of like, that's like, I'm not actually gonna say it, but it's that exchange of information. And when she's like, why wouldn't you tell me? And she's like, well, I have to be careful what I share with you so you don't use it against me, referencing, the season 3 finale. Right. But then, Matsson is saying, like, he's heard it or he's noticed it as well. Yeah. The Frank Roman exchange, because Frank has always been of this, motley crew. Frank's always been one of the good ones. Of the greatest. He's not working with the best people. Maybe he's not the best person, but in this group of rogues, he seems to come out smelling the best. He's the one that seems to have at least a little bit of a conscience. And so for Roman to approach him, and Roman has always been such a prick, to see him be like, hey, if Kendall's not up for this fight, I'm going to need a posse. And Frank, the most dismissive I think we've seen Frank in 4 seasons. Oh yeah, now you want to be buddies? Okay, yeah, let's get through the day and then we'll talk. Greg coming in saying that, Tom's not going to be there and he wants to take his place as one of the wheelmen,
Yeah.
pushing the casket up to the front, and then Caroline volunteering Peter. And you've never seen, literally the day before, Greg sold Shiv down the river,
Yeah.
but she still picks Greg over her
She
mom.
says, yes, no.
No.
Right. You son of a bitch, you want to use my dad? Like, he can use my dad to establish himself, the corpse of my father, because he's been around us and his family. You can't do it. You're new guy into this mix, trying to use and scale. So yeah, she picked the social ladder climber that she knows versus the one she doesn't.
Yeah. But also and again, this is something I noticed more on the second rewatch, or my rewatch. The way that Mencken and Matsson are kind of eyeballing each other,
like circling each other in the background of the church. Yeah, absolutely, Shannon. Great point.
Who's the bigger dog in the pen?
Yeah,
that's what they're trying to they're trying to kind of suss out right now. So again, just wonderfully shot. I mean, such a huge scene, beautiful, beautiful location. Everything about again, bathed in tragedy, but you're still laughing.
Yeah. Craziness. I think I was weighing in on my stuff already. I love the Marcia and all the women scene. That was so great. And that actually ends up being like 4 women who have experienced this man finding a kind of commonality in this moment. It didn't, although it was initially like Lady Caroline was trying to dig the knives in, she might have also been trying to say, like, we merit being in the front row because we dealt with this son of a bitch on the daily basis. Like, when he went home from work, it was us who had to deal with him. And so I like that there was a little bit, even though it was done in the most clumsy and awkward way by Lady Caroline, the result actually ends up being something that I think was really strong, to have all 4 women there finding comfort or finding strength in saying, yeah, we belong in the front row. You try to push us in the back. Lady Caroline is our access. No one's going to fuck with her. So we get to sit here now, and essentially being recognized for their time in dealing with him. And yeah, I agree with you with Shiv. Everything so smart to pitch herself, so smart to put herself in a position to do what she's doing. And Greg, of course, always the social climber. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll jump into the eulogies and what happens after the ceremony right after this.
Oh, there's no theme music.
No,
I wasn't ready.
I know.
The last 2 weeks we've had theme music.
I know. I didn't like it. It wasn't the right move. All right, let's move on to the eulogies. Shannon, I here's what I've written in my notes: is simply Ewan, Roman, Kendall, Shiv. That's essentially what I wrote, because I think both of us will remember what happened in each of these eulogies. Ewan talking about World War II, but also talking about how Logan brought out and took advantage of the meagerness in men, and also talking about, as I said, in World War II, having to be quiet, him and his brother surviving at 5 and 4.5 years old, and then Logan possibly bringing home polio that killed his sister, which is something that has been referenced since season 1, the death of his sister, to see that come back in this way. But then the way he ends it, and of course, Greg, who had tried to stop him, essentially gives him, it was a hard take, but it was a good take. So thank you, Dad or Grandpa. And then Roman comes up, and Roman absolutely breaks, just shatters into a million pieces. One of the best acting moments that you're going to find. They might submit this performance. I thought it was performance a couple episodes ago. It's this performance. It's so incredible to break like that. I mean, when that wave of grief comes over you, as Shannon and I both know, having lost our fathers, it is unstoppable. It is inconsolable. You say the most insane things. I know for me, it was seeing my father in the morgue. I lost my mind. The nurses had to leave the room because they were crying at I was wailing like some kind of animal. I kept trying to grab my dad's hand to bring him back to life, smack it onto my head. It was insane. And I found out later that they normally don't let people go into the morgue area to touch the body of their parent. So it was some unique thing that I was able to convince them to let me go and be near his body, because obviously I wasn't there when he died. So those moments you have, and you can't explain them, but he is crying about it all. Shiv and Kendall and Connor give him such great consolation, but you also see Jerry react to this, really kind of maybe a little crack in Jerry's anger at him, and seeing him react in this way Kendall takes over. Starts out a little rocky, but then really lands the plane, just like it did in Living Plus. Little rocky, and then absolutely wins the crowd by the end. Then Shiv comes up there and gives her eulogy, essentially vacillating between someone who has been subjected to abuse and being mistreated because she's a woman, as he mistreated other women, but also someone who understood, like, what he did for her. And she says at the end there, "You did okay, Dad. You did okay." So your thoughts on all these eulogies here, Shannon? A lot was tossed out from all four of them in their reactions and in their words. What'd you think? And then Connor didn't say a damn word, thank God. So what
well, I mean, Connor did ask.
He did ask, he did, but we knew the answer.
He submitted the script, and Shiv had a lot of notes to the point that it was ultimately decided against on.
Yeah.
I loved that Greg tried to use his stopping his grandfather as a trade. Is like, well, if you give me an introduction to Mencken, I'll keep an eye on Grandpa Ewan. The moment that James Cromwell starts walking up, and you see, and again, this was one of the things that I'm glad that we had the subtitles on. You see, not only is Greg trying to stop his grandfather, his daughter is too. Dad, and he's like, Gramps, and Greg's saying, you're making a scene. He's like, no, Gregory, you are making the scene. And Greg trying to say sorry to the rest of the Sibs as he sits down. This was the subtitle line that I did not catch the first time. His mom says, "It's not your fault." Greg says, "Shut up." And she goes, "I said it wasn't your fault. Don't tell me to shut up." Like, I'm so curious how much of that, if that was all on the page, or if that was them letting these two kind of have a little fun, because it was, I had such a belly laugh at that this morning. And then, Ewan sort of heading up and saying, what kind of people would not want me to talk about my brother for a share price? Like, oh my gosh, that's just such a gut punch. And, the story that he tells about their youth, I mean, coming over on the boats and, these children being told that if you cough, if you talk, if you make any noise, the German U-boats are going to hear us, and they're going to blow us out of the water. And then the whole idea that their uncle had sent Logan to a better school, which he didn't like. And when he came back, he was sick, and that he always kind of blamed himself that he was the reason that their younger sister died. So we do get a better picture of how Logan was made. Like, you look at the situation that he grew up in, and Ewan does sort of sympathize with his brother in that moment. He's just like, look, our uncle and aunt didn't explicitly say he was the reason, but they didn't disabuse him of that either. But then you can see where Ewan and Logan split. And Logan, even though they both would kind of potentially take advantage of the meagerness in men, that Logan would really, really exploit it. And you can see the shift in, like, great performance by all of them, but again, by KIERAN CULKIN, in those reactions that you had referenced earlier, Johnny. You can see that shift, and how much of it was finding out these stories that he didn't know, and how much of it is the grief finally winning over.
And I would throw one more thing in, Shannon. The fact that he was trying to ride high into that church, and Frank shot him down, and having to shoot off his mouth at Marcia, shoot off his mouth at Shiv, and then it all just comes crashing down upon him, all the pressure.
I mean, in the 4 seasons that we've seen Roman, he's never had, to my knowledge, a big win in front of a crowd. Like, we've seen Kendall do it several times. But when it finally comes time, I mean, the video that Kendall sent, the manipulated audio of Logan saying Kendall or Roman always gets it wrong. And it happens again. Like, to watch him try to get those words out, saying, my father, Logan Roy, was a great man. Even if you rewatch that first scene, you hear what he is saying. And it's like, you know, it's they're words. I mean, you know, no one's going to critique your eulogy in general, but it's like, is this a great one? Maybe not so. And having to follow this impassioned speech that James Cromwell gave, it just cuts his legs out from under him. And you see again that crumbling that he does. And looking at the casket, I also want to say when the casket comes in, you see that shift in Roman as well, knowing that his father's body is in the room.
Yep.
And as he just sort of again just comes apart, you know, the thing that I think we both loved at the beginning of this season was watching the siblings all on the same side.
Yeah.
We like those scenes when they have, and the beginning of this season, it seemed like we were going to get a lot more of that. And that's why the season has been especially tragic, because we've seen this slow tearing of this, you know, this coalition that is just so sad. But you see, you know, the three of them kind of come to the rescue. KIERAN CULKIN saying, is he in there? Can we get him out? I mean, as you said, in these moments, you're not thinking clearly.
Yeah, you're not logical.
No, things that are coming out of your mouth. I mean, there's a disconnect between your logical. Oh no, did I freeze again?
Yeah. Sorry, Shan. I want you to. I want people to hear what you're saying. So, can you go out and come back in?
Yeah, I'll do it one more time. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Yep.
To our audience, I am so sorry right now. Technology is a wonderful and terrible thing. But yes, just watching how Roman comes apart and how his siblings are there coming to the rescue. Yeah. I honestly thought Connor was going to be the guy to step up.
Yeah, right. Connor take advantage.
I thought, like, all right, it's his moment.
Willa, it's my time. Yeah.
Put me in, coach. But then, yeah, I mean, you see Kendall step up on the fly again, just does such a great job, because it was less about his emotions with his father, and it was more about what his father built.
Yeah.
And you hear, like, when he talks about the money, and you see the difference in what Ewan said and what Kendall said and who they were talking to.
Yeah.
Because most of the people there were like Logan. They weren't like Ewan.
Right.
So you see the response that Kendall gets. And then Shiv going up. I mean, one of my sisters was very, very close with my dad. Yeah. And watching how Shiv is trying to put together these complicated words about her dad. I mean, that last line, you know, goodbye, my world of a father. Oh my gosh, that was just so heartbreaking. And a terrific performance by Sarah Snook.
Yeah, 100% agree, man. All of them, you know, from James Cromwell to Sarah Snook, and those four eulogy deliverers were incredible in different ways in this section of the episode, which was just fantastic. And that's the kind of madness that can happen. And Roman clearly cracked, and you saw Mencken change his face when he saw Roman crack like that, because, you know, people like Mencken don't respect emotions, they see it as weakness. And so when he saw that with Roman, that was the moment where I knew, like, Roman was done being number one. And and for us who are sympathetic and empathetic people, of course we cared, and it was beautiful to have all the children come up and hug him and try to guide him back. And he kept apologizing, and Kendall was like, it's okay, you know. So there was all of that, but Mencken immediately was done with him in that moment, and that's something that's really tough to see for sure. And we'll see how that plays out as we keep going in the episode. Shannon, let's move on to everything after the funeral. Roman is after the funeral here. Hugo tells Kendall that Shiv has offered an American CEO to Matsson to woo Mencken to approve the deal. We also see that Mencken shakes Kendall's hand. Mencken makes an effort to go shake Kendall's hand, even though he knows that Kendall isn't 100% on board with him. He does that, and he ignores Roman. Then we head over to the mausoleum, man, the gaudiness of the mausoleum. And I think they said it was like some pet manufacturer guy or pet goods guy or vet store guy who had initially bought it. And then Logan had bought it for the bargain price of $5 million. and it's so gaudy and so large. And then they go inside the mausoleum. Everyone except Roman. Roman still can't quite come to terms with what's going on. They're all inside the mausoleum doing, as you said, a little bit of gallows humor, like who's going to end up on top. And Connor saying he wants the bunk bed, the top bunk bed. Kendall saying, sorry, Connor saying that, right? And Kendall saying, we had trouble sharing a drink by the end. And Roman chiming in saying, I had trouble breathing around him. So really all these openings talking about these things as well. And then we get to the final benediction. Roman can't handle it and heads to the car, just takes off to the car. It's all too much for him. Shiv, after the benediction, Shiv gets up and asks Karl and Frank how her dad actually was. And we get that moment, as you mentioned here, Shannon, where Frank says, it was a salty dog, but he was a good egg. And then Shiv gives them the, okay, and then walks off. And then I think it's Karl who says, right? And Frank says, right? And Karl goes, right. Yeah. Even they don't believe the bullshit. Then we have this moment with Hugo, because Kendall is now feeling the high of delivering a great eulogy there, and the claps that he got after, the applause he got afterwards, kind of like Living Plus. He tells Hugo to use the press to float stories that key members of the family don't want to go, and the board don't want to go along with this acquisition. And he offers him a job. I'm going to take you with me. But it's not a collaboration. You're going to be my dog, but the scraps you get off the table are going to be millions. Are you in? And God love Fisher Stevens. I've never seen anyone deliver woof, woof better than Fisher Stevens did in that moment. So let's stop there, Shannon. A lot of stuff happening at this mausoleum, the back and forth, Roman not being able to take it, them talking inside the mausoleum, and then Kendall and Hugo there afterwards.
I mean, again, a lot of great humor in this. Shiv saying that it's a tax write-off because technically it's a residence.
That's right.
I mean,
I forgot about that. That's right. That's right. Yeah.
I mean, just some really, really great humor. And the fact that Logan has sent photos of this to Connor, like, hey, look at where I'm gonna be laid to rest. But then he adds this line that I think is so interesting about the person of Logan Roy, when he says he didn't want to go on the ground. Like he felt he was he didn't want to be under the ground. He was above it. And that's where he's going to be laid to rest eternally. And then you see, at least on the one side, there are 3 spots.
Yes.
Now, the camera doesn't turn over to the other. So maybe there's more, but I don't think it's an accident. There are 3 spots that one of them, I'm presuming Connor, wasn't going to be invited into the mausoleum. He was going to invite Kendall, Shiv, and Roman. Right. But then the whole idea, like, you hear them kind of coming to grips. I mean, and they've known their dad was not a great guy.
Yeah.
But he was their dad. Yeah. He wasn't a great dad, but he was their dad. Mm-hmm. And the whole idea that Kendall couldn't get through a scotch with him, he affected Roman's breathing. Yeah. Like that's what kind of individual this was. And he used people, he exposed that meagerness in them. And then he would make a joke about it, again, referencing Ewan's eulogy. Yeah. But then again, that moment as they're doing the benediction and Roman can't take it. You see him run back to the car again. Like he cannot handle the tornado of emotions that he's feeling. But as you mentioned already, Kendall's now in the riding high. Yeah. And that moment that he has between him and Hugo, we're seeing Kendall become more and more like Logan, where he's just like, look, this isn't a partnership. This isn't a collaboration. You're my bitch. Yeah. But you're going to be a rich bitch.
Yeah. I can't deal with it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And yes, that delivery of that line, that woof, woof. I mean, that kind of tells you everything you need to know, but also Shiv really grasping with who her father was and asking his closest confidants, was he okay? Was he an okay guy? And they know he wasn't, but the company isn't sold yet.
Yeah.
So they can't express their true feelings yet.
Right. Plus it's the daughter of your boss that you work with for such a long time. She's coming to ask you these questions. Like, you're not going to tell the truth at the
Right.
mausoleum while he's about to be put in the ground, like, or not in the ground, but in the mausoleum. It just, yeah, you wouldn't do that. So, but Shiv clearly still trying to find reasons to love her father, to excuse her father. She goes to these guys who've known him the longest, who probably have some very strong feelings about him, to try to get some understanding. Yeah, exactly. So very interesting stuff. All right, let's get to the reception here. This happens after the mausoleum. Kendall hires Colin, who we see. Colin, who we got a shot of him in the church there at the funeral, but he hires Colin after he hears that Colin's been talking to a shrink, or he tells him that he's heard that he's been talking to a shrink, and tells him, "Hey, come work for me. Talk to me." And this is such an interesting moment, because remember in season 3 when Colin is defending Logan, and maybe it was earlier this year. I don't remember in season 3 or early this year, where he says to Roman, "I know what you are. I know who you are," right? Just kind of belittling Kendall, and now he's going to go work for Kendall. So just so interesting to see that happen. But Kendall also talks to Mencken, who now thinks, Mencken now thinks he's the power player in the room. Kendall tries to, kind of push the idea of stopping the deal. And Mencken says, "Oh, you guys, you're part of the music. Now you want to pick the track? I don't know about all that." And just before he can get deeper into this, the clumsy praying mantis Greg shows up and interrupts him to try to get the intro with Mencken, because clearly Roman didn't get in the intro. So he's just going to do it himself, and then tries to anoint himself as a pseudo boy king who helped him become a president. Then Roman comes in, interrupts, try to steer Greg away. Then Connor interrupts to try to talk about the Slovakian ambassadorship. And I said, Lord God, this family and the knee pads they hustle to put on to suck the dick of a powerful person is incredible to watch. Let me just tell you. Then Shiv ends up saving Mencken, pulls him away, pitches the American CEO stuff with Matsson to Mencken. Matsson, though, is a bit of a stuttering, muttering fool here, as he keeps cutting off Mencken by pitching how he can be at the tip of the cultural cultural zeitgeist here that can affect and influence the culture, and having him be a part of it. So Mencken takes it in and then walks away considering it. Kendall tries to get Roman to get it together to take on Shiv, because he knows that they have to take. He clearly finds out that they have to go and take on Shiv and Matsson, and he does the shit that he did, as you mentioned earlier, by sending that video to him after the Living Plus presentation. He goes after Roman and says, "You fucked it. You fucked it, but you can save it. You fucked it, but you can save it," which is such a slam and a dig here. Then Tom shows up and talks to Shiv, and this is a really interesting interaction between them, considering what we had in the last episode, where Tom apologizes, and Tom has been up for 3 days, and Tom has had rarely any sleep for the 3 days, and he breaks down about Logan, and he breaks down emotionally about everything, apologizes to Shiv, and then Shiv tells him, "Go back to our apartment. I don't care. Go back and rest and go do your thing." And she's really caring and loving of him. And she even gets emotional, which I think is a fantastic moment. So, God, are they going to make it? Jesus. Matsson calls Shiv and tells her that Mencken essentially approved of their plan. So they look to have a leg up here. And then Roman, who after Logan berates him and whatever, Roman realizes like everyone's ignoring him. He's kind of, been made fun of. We see the Grays playing the audio of him breaking down. Even Mencken calls him the Grim Weeper, which Kendall tries to shut down. So then eventually Roman runs out, confronts the protesters who are walking by just to get any kind of reaction, and gets punched in the face for his troubles and stumbles along with the protesters afterwards as the episode ends. I love that it was Jessie I think it was Jessie Armstrong who said in the post episode doc that Roman is more comfortable being hated or getting any kind of reaction than he is being ignored and just kind of hanging out. Like, he needs to be hated. It's a masochism within him. So, and we go back to that thing of him being in a cage when he was a kid, right? I mean, that was a part of it, him being berated, like Jerry berated him when they were having their little flirtations. This is something he gets off on. So encouraging the protesters to attack him by walking amongst them fits within Roman perfectly. So what do you think of everything that happens here at this reception, Shannon, between everybody involved?
Again, terrific scene, really, really funny as well.
Yeah.
As Kendall approaches Mencken and is saying like, "Hey, so we should have a talk to talk, big bad foreign tech coming in to take great American companies," and that whole like, "Well, I'll see what I can do. I'll help, but we'll see." And you remember Menken's people didn't tell Kendall that he would block the
No,
deal.
no. They told Roman.
They told Roman.
Yeah.
And so, and we are and that was Roman delivering the message.
Right.
Did they explicitly say they were going to block the deal? Or did they say, we'll try to help?
Right.
Did Roman extrapolate something that may not have been promised?
Yeah, just to have some power against his brother and sister. Yeah, good point, Shannon. Yeah.
So then as they're talking, and again, the only thing that could have made that entrance more awkward is if Greg came in on the bike. His whole thing, like, oh, well, congratulations. Greg with ATN, with Tom, and him is still trying to give Tom Tom was the one who made the call.
Yeah,
and
right.
Roman not swinging in until Greg is there, I think was the funniest thing, where he comes in telling him to go away, telling him to fuck off. Yeah. Then Connor running in and them exchanging places, and Ken like, you're messing up. You're messing up my flow. You're messing up my game right now. And Connor's like, no. I just want to have a conversation with my colleague here to talk about what was it? Macro Slovenia micro budget. And then watching how Shiv again does a fantastic job here when she says, excuse me, Mr. President, like he's not been sworn in yet.
Right.
Mr. President, I'm your extraction team. And you watch how he willingly and gladly goes with Shiv to go meet Matsson. And watching the two of them talk, like, again, and this is on the rewatch, there is a moment where Menken exhales deeply.
Yes.
I don't know if it's a sigh, but he exhales deeply. Yeah. And at first it's like, oh, this isn't going well.
Yeah.
But then I think I think it was an exhale of, okay, this is what I'm going to have to deal with this guy, because these four, I'm not going to work with these four.
Yeah.
That sort of that sigh of acceptance, like, okay, you and I can do this. And I really liked his exchange with Shiv, where he's just like, despite the friction that you and me and your dad had, we lined up ideologically. Yeah. And Shiv immediately doing a 180 on everything that she has said she's believed in. It's like, my dad was flexible. I can be too. Watching the Grays see that video, or listening to the audio of poor Roman. And again, Roman's a bastard, but true. Being a grieving son, you and I certainly have a degree of sympathy for that. But as Kendall comes in, knowing that he's in the power position of their partnership, but he's not necessarily in the power position. Oh, this alliterative dialogue. The power position of the entire scenario, knowing that I will need Roman's help here. Yeah. But him sort of establishing, I'm the alpha dog. Like, you fucked it. You did. Like, sorry, I get it. It happens. People mess up, but you did mess up. Yeah. So I'm going to need your help to unmess it up. I don't need a lot of help. I just need a little. Yeah. But you owe me that little because you fucked it. And again, watching, like, I thought for sure, I'm like, Roman is going to get the shit beat out of it. He might die here. He might run across a police officer who beats the shit out of him, who doesn't say like, oh, doesn't recognize him. Right. But you're in line with these protesters. We got to get someone. You seem like an easy target, and you got a mouth on you. So I thought for sure that's what was going to happen.
Yeah, for me, I take away the fact that nobody has respect for Kendall. I mean, the fact that Greg thought he could, Greg of all people, thought he could interfere with Kendall talking to the future president of the United States, possibly. And yes, your status absolutely changes once you become president-elect, possibly. There's a certain level of respect, but Greg, who just can't help himself, and I know you used to defend him. I hope you're finally done with him. He's such a terrible person and may end up being CEO by the time this is all over. Look, they said an American CEO. He didn't say Shiv necessarily. So this Greg coming in and doing the thing that he does shows such a disrespect to Kendall. Then Roman coming and trying to get Greg out of there, but not succeeding. Greg ignores Roman, for God's sakes, which tells the level that Roman has fallen so quickly after last night because of the funeral and his breaking down. And then Connor coming in, displacing Roman is a great bit of blocking and staging to show how far Roman has tumbled down the power dynamic and structure here to again interfere with Kendall talking to Mencken. My needs, you simple fuck, my needs of being an ambassador to Slovakia are much more important than you trying to save the company in a certain way in your mind and make us a lot of money. That Kendall doesn't, Logan would have never allowed that to happen. And that's the one thing that's missing with Kendall. And unfortunately, he's going to have to sacrifice that part of himself in order to fully achieve the power that he wants to have. And I don't know that he's going to be able to do it in the series finale next week, man. I really don't. And nothing says Matsson is going to stay with Shiv. Now that Mencken is aboard, Matsson can choose whoever he wants to have as an American CEO of all of this. And I don't know what's going to happen with Roman. So there's a lot of moving pieces to where we think certain people are in power. And as we saw in this episode, Roman coming in power is now the least powerful person by the end of the episode. Kendall coming in with real questions and not sure and shooting his mouth off at Jess and Rava, now really kind of riding high. But Shiv countering him has equal amount of power now with a billionaire in her back pocket. So there is a lot of that's going to have to be worked out in this series finale, Shannon, for sure. What are your predictions as we head into to the end of this review? What are your predictions for next week?
I think Mencken is not going to block the deal. That Gojo is going to acquire Waystar. On the board level, I think they're going to look at the volatility of Kendall and Roman and Shiv.
Yeah.
And granted, Shiv's not on their side, but they're going to look at the volatility of that, and they are going to okay the acquisition as well. And I do think Matsson is going to pick Greg.
Wow.
I think he's going to keep it in the family, but he doesn't want Shiv. Like Shiv said at one point, she's like, well, I'm just the puppet for my my Swedish boss. But the fact that he doesn't really think that Shiv would willingly be a puppet.
Right.
Also, her pregnancy, he's going to go with Greg. He's going to go with someone that he can 100% control.
You might be right, dude. You might 100% be right. Right. He can control Greg. Greg wants to have access to power. I mean, and the irony that Tom would have to report to Greg just after all these seasons that Tom would end up having to keep his job. He'll have to report to Greg, and the board pushes out the kids so that Greg becomes the CEO. That makes all the sense in the world. I mean, it's like people pitch Jar Jar Binks as a Sith. I would have to eventually be the same thing. Essentially be the same thing. So incredible stuff for sure, man. So we will see next week for sure as we get into this. All right. Well, thank you all so much for watching or listening to this spoiler review here for season 4, episode 9 of Succession. We appreciate it madly. One more episode to go. Shannon, thanks so much for joining me as always every week on this. It's been such a blast. Please let people know where they can find you. And if you have any final words.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Shannon_McClung, on Instagram, Shannon the Geek Buddy. You can see me every week with the present Mr. Rocha and the absent Mr. Vogel on the Geek Buddies. June is fast approaching, along with Secret Invasion. I imagine we're going to be doing some sort of reviewing for that as well. And yeah, I think that's it. Oh, in terms of final words, I mean, Succession might go down as one of HBO's best series. I mean, it has, as you said, Johnny, there's never been like a bad episode, but season 4 has just been, for me, home run after home run after home run. So yeah, I am so curious what's going to happen. I feel like this 4th season has shot by.
Yeah. And rarely do shows end on such a high note in their last seasons. Rarely does it happen so consistently as it's happening in this season. As for me, you can follow me at The Rocha Says on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, The Outlaw Nation on Twitch. And please remember to subscribe to the channel down below. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that bell button. So important. If you want to support us on the Patreon, patreon.com/John Rocha. See a tier that works for you. And I think that's it. Yeah, look for the Geek Buddies episodes all coming up this week. I got my Little Mermaid review coming up as well. So a lot, and my Fast X spoiler review, which I'm going to have a lot of fun talking about, both good and bad. And yeah, those are coming out real soon. But y'all take care of yourselves. Be well. And don't forget to join us next week for the finale review of this series from HBOMax here on the Outlaw Nation. Y'all take care. Until then, peace.